I click the links to join the channel or the subscribe star when I've started to put stuff up there. Odyssey, Bit Chute, Gap, Telegram. So here's the thing with being manipulated by these people in the media. Obviously there's going to be a lot of not anger is probably too strong a word, but frustration at people who see Lord of the Rings and see it be subverted and corrupted by these globalist vermin parasites. And so in the media they're doing these interviews, the shows Rings of Power is coming out there, they're having the actors do damage control and like come out ahead of it and kind of imply that you're ISTAPHOBIC if you don't want to see this Bolshevik propaganda. And so it's kind of designed to foment discord between two groups of people, because you see her black face and she doesn't know what she's talking about. She hasn't thought it through, because everything she's saying is the wrong thing. If she wanted to do damage control, she just has no idea. But the interview should really, and so it's kind of designed for you to hate her and her group, because these globalist puppet masters, that's what they do. They try to foment discord between groups. They try to keep fair and dusky at each other's throats, so you're so distracted with each other with these kind of like pawns fighting pawns, instead of looking up to look to see to the kings and the queens who are pulling the strings. Oh, what a mixed metaphor that was. Look at the puppet masters. But they keep you distracted, like with these actors, and it's like the better interview would be, well, let's look at the writers, the directors, the people who greenlit this. Let's look at the people who greenlit this, and Wheel of Time, and the Star Trek, and you see the interviews with those people, not the actors who are you can hate them all you want, you can criticize them on social media, but when it comes down to it, it's like it's a paycheck for them. They're not going to turn down a role. They're not in the position to turn down roles. Even though yesterday I said, yeah, you can get angry at the actors, and you surely can, because they shouldn't be taking these roles, or at least if you feel that way, that's fine. But they're not the ones who are making the decisions. This chick, you see her smiling face, and your brain automatically goes to her and gets angry at her. It's like, she's not the one pulling the trigger on $1 billion project. She's just an actor. I don't know anything about her, and she's having fun. It's like she's on a set in a big thing. It's like no matter how well the show does, and it's probably going to bomb. It's still a credit to her, because she was in it, and she probably did a fine job. And everyone that gets to work on this show, it should be on the shoulders of Amazon. But I'm saying is, like, don't allow the red herring across the chessboard with the puppet masters. See, that's 3 in 1, to distract you away from the people who are making these shows. The interviews, their faces are much more interesting than these the actors who are just carrying out the machinations of these puppet masters. So what happened is they're trying to get out ahead of what I think it's come out next month, what they absolutely 100% know will be a bomb. It looks horrible. Nobody's excited about this. And they just had the Wheel of Time, and kind of a similar thing. It's like, was anyone excited about Wheel of Time? Nope. I think it's still out there, but nobody's talking about this. Nobody's going to talk about Lord of the Rings either. There'll be this kind of false energy with the SJWs on social media they'll try to get behind it, and they'll try to rally people, but really their argument is that you're ISTAPHOBIC if you don't want to see it. It's like, I don't care. I don't care what Bolsheviks use to. It's like all those. That's just Bolshevik media propaganda. Those aren't real terms. Those are just control terms to manipulate people into being on board with this kind of nonsense. Anyway, so they're doing interviews, and her interview. Everything she said was wrong, because she didn't give any thought to it. And because, she's drinking the globalist Kool-Aid also. Her interview is talking about POC representation, all this kind of stuff. And nobody in the media is ever actually going to push back and go, yeah, but aren't you appropriating, a European Englishman's story and European culture and mythology, and like, aren't you just a culture vulture kind of thing? It's like, and that would shock the actor if he was asked that question. No, there's no media that's media anymore. If a reporter asked something like that, if they asked hard questions, they would be dogpiled on social media. They'd immediately be fired, and they'd be blacklisted for asking hard but reasonable questions that you would have asked for any other group. They'd be fired for that, and you'd never work in the media again. Reporters know that. They very much have the finger on their pulse. It's just a job to them. There's no reporter today or in the past 20 years who's a reporter. Look at what the questions they ask, and look at the color of the skin. If you're fair, you'll be asked hard questions. If you have light hair and light eyes, you'll be asked hard questions. If you're a POC, you won't be asked hard questions. And before you just kind of blow that sentence off, look around at the interviews that have been asked for pop culture and for media, for this stuff in general, and you go, oh, they really do treat these people like purse puppies. They literally, the soft bigotry of lowered expectations. You'll never be asked the hard, like John Boyega is never asked a hard question. He's allowed to say the most, when Star Wars was coming out 5 years ago, he was allowed to say the most insane things on social media and with reporters. Nobody ever asked him a question. It was all softballs. And, if you're an actor, you're a POC, and you notice this, it's gotta be a weird feeling to know, like, how they see you. It's to know that, like, if you were simply a few shades lighter, you'd be asked hard questions. But the reporter's not willing to get fired over it. Anyway, so let me say this. Could you put AfroHobbits, I don't know, part 9, I think. Could you put AfroHobbits in Lord of the Rings? And, I've been making like 9 or 10 of these videos saying it's ridiculous. And yes, it is ridiculous. But you could put AfroHobbits in Lord of the Rings if you wanted to. I could do it, but Hollywood couldn't. Or someone like you could do it. Hollywood can't do it because they treat POCs as purse puppies and Mary Sues. They're only pawns to them to be used as vectors to carry out this anti-European sentiment. It's a blonde man bad. That's the only reason. Don't for a minute think that Hollywood likes POCs. They hate everyone equally. It's just that some people are tools to pit against other people by these people who are pulling the strings. So yeah, you could put AfroHobbits in Lord of the Rings. You simply open up the universe, because it's roughly an analogy or a metaphor for Europe, right? So if you extrapolated that, like, to bend Tolkien's rules without breaking them would be like open it up to be openly the whole planet of the Lord of the Rings universe is an analogy for Earth, but it's in another dimension sort of thing. And then you could include every country on Earth, and it would have its analog in the Lord of the Rings universe. And you could have the AfroHobbits hop on their sailboats and they sail over to team up with the Euro Hobbits and the Russia Hobbits, whatever, to fight the common threat, whoever's the common threat in this prequel movie. Yeah, that would make sense. But the way they did it was a globalist interpretation, not a nationalist interpretation. Where nationalism, that there's discrete entities and people are not fungible. You don't mix people together. It just doesn't work. People do not want to do that. But in this globalist interpretation, they can't do my way of telling it, where it's, it would be a logical, yeah, we've got these hobbits from down south, sunny climates. Well, that's why they have dark skins, to protect them from the sun. That would logically make sense to come fight this common threat. Because then they're distinct entities and they're not the same people. They're different people. And you tell a globalist that different people are different, they just get outraged when you say the very obvious truth. People are not fungible. They have different environments that created, like an owl is not an eagle. They're similar, but they're slightly different environments and they're suited to different ways of hunting prey. So, yeah, you could do it like that, but they did it the opposite. They had, like, all these people live, we're not a tribe or a nation. Like, well, that's breaking Tolkien's rules, his spirit. And they said, like, when we were confused, we just went back and asked, what would Tolkien do? Well, no, he didn't. I mean, that's just asinine. And this is part of the humiliation ritual that these globalists do, is they pee on your leg and they tell you these bizarro stories that are not in accord with reality for so long, and they do these interviews with this woman who was never asked any hard questions about, well, how do you think, you're taking this European story, you're erasing Europeans from a European story that they wrote, and, like, doesn't it kind of feel belittling to you that Amazon doesn't value African stories? There's no shortage of African stories. It's a big place, and African storytellers. And you don't have to be African to tell an African story, but you probably would want to, find an African writer. But there's a ton of, you could tell a fantasy universe set in Africa and it would make sense. But the point is, Amazon doesn't value POC stories. They only value POCs as tools to carry out this anti-white hatred, this part of this humiliation ritual. But it's an L for both sides, because it doesn't humiliate us, because we're just not going to watch it. We're very, very clued into what these globalists are doing. But if you're them, these POCs who are looking at this, Amazon doesn't value your stories enough to tell them. You're only valuable to tell the European stories because they're using you to think that they're hurting these English stories, these European stories. That's your only value to them. African stories have no value. They will not tell an African story where the only way they tell an African story if it's African against the Dutch or English or something like that. But if you told this fantasy story where it was, they're fighting like the dragons and crocodile men and the elephant gods type of thing, it's like, I could write it for you. I could write it for you for a very small amount of money, and it would be cool. But you'd have these, these Afro elves and hobbits and analogs type of stuff, whatever's not on copywritten, to fight the elephant god and the monkey man and the crocodile man and all these kind of mythological creatures that figure into African mythology. And you make a lot of it up. It's just loosely set in Africa. And it would make sense, but it's like, oh, the story is fun, it's entertaining, and it shows good people and bad people set in this mythical African, universe. But they're not telling a story that is blonde man bad. And that's the only purpose of Hollywood today, is to tell that story of to get you to hate European people. That's all that Hollywood does now. So if you told a story where, like a Central African story, the Zulus, where Africans are fighting Africans, and for a lot of those stories, like the Dutch and the English were sitting back and kind of watching it, a lot of times they were victims. You had people who were farming. Europeans are farming in Africa because doesn't Africa need diversity too? Don't they value inclusion from it? How well did open borders work out for the Indians? They were just diversifying the Indians. They were the victims of a lot of stuff, but Hollywood's not going to tell a story of one Shaka Zulu's brothers fighting each other for control of the kingdom, because it's Africans fighting Africans, and that doesn't carry the narrative of blonde man bad. And I know how this sounds. It sounds like one of those far-right website theories, but before you just throw this belief out, look at what I'm saying and look for examples around you in comic books, in movies, in modern storytelling. Look at the people. Don't look at this, this pretty black face and see her face and think like, oh, she's the enemy because she's stealing the story. She's just an actor. The people who are pulling the strings on it are the enemies, and they don't look like her at all. Tricky. I mean, don't be manipulated is what I'm saying. And anyway, like, comment, subscribe, check me out on Subscribestar, and I will see you guys all next episode.